Welcome to the Wizard of Radical Self-Respect. My name is Jared Mello, and I'm the Shepherd of Black Sheep. Today, I'm going to go over an interview that Oprah did of Scott Galloway. Scott Galloway, he makes all of the rounds right now when it comes to young men's issues, and I agree with a lot of what he says. I don't know if I'll agree with everything that he says, but I'll also give you my suggestions for these young guys, because there's a group of guys in the audience here. And what I would say to them is, you got to practice radical self-respect. Part of practicing radical self-respect is getting your mental health and hormones in order. If your mental health, and for men, your testosterone, if that's not at a good level, it's going to impact everything. The same thing if you have a mood disorder and you're seeing the life through anxiety or depression, that's going to see everything. And guess what? Your hormones also impact your mood. Absolutely. So what I see in some of these young guys is just like, they kind of need a kick in the ass a little bit. And that's kind of what they would say is exactly the wrong thing to say to them, is what they would say. Oh no, we need support, coddling almost. It's like, I don't know about that. Maybe I'm old school. People would maybe say, Jared, you're antiquated in your beliefs, but and maybe I'll even sound like my dad a little bit, because my dad wouldn't have much patience for some of this either. And granted, I didn't like it very much when I was growing up, but it's only in retrospect can I see the positives of some of it. And I say, okay, I didn't like it, but I can see the benefits now. But it's also only because I got through to the other side. So it can be easy for me to forget how much I struggled myself as a kid. So I should really have more compassion for the struggles, but it can be tough for me sometimes. Ellie, what's shaking? Today we're going to go over some young men's issues out there in the world. And this is an important thing. I think it's what I talked to the Tin Man about. That's an interview I did 6 months ago or so. And hey, this is 50% of relationships right here. So let's see what they all have to say for themselves, and I'll give you my breakdowns as we go. But Ellie, how are you today? Phil Bradley's still here, not late nor early, just on time, like a wizard would be. Let's see. Let's see what they all say for themselves.
Just to be raw about this, would you have sex with you? Can't believe I just said that on Oprah.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining me here on the Oprah podcast. I am just delighted to be on the road in New York City with this fantastic audience. Thank you so much. If you're watching us on YouTube, you'll notice that we have more men than usual in our audience. That's because we invited them here, because we're talking about the alarming statistics that show that many men, especially young men, are not okay. And actually, in what some people believe is a dire crisis. Before I introduce my guest today, I want to just hear from some of you here. So what's on your mind? What's your reaction to all of the headlines? You all have been seeing the headlines yourselves. And how is that impacting or reflecting on your life? So Max, what do you want to say?
First off, thank you both so much. I think this is such an important conversation. I'm 23. I'm a senior at NYU, and I think I'm speaking for all of my friends when I say that we feel lonely. Young men, anger is really the only societally acceptable emotion that we can express.
I mean, I've been hearing this for a long time now. Anger is the only socially acceptable emotion to express. But all I hear online is the opposite. I hear, oh, men should be more vulnerable. Men should open up more. Men should show their emotions. Men should cry. Men should this. And it's like, dude, when are you not allowed to do those things? That's what everyone rewards you for, especially online now. And this guy, I mean, unfortunately for him, looks like a bit of a low testosterone type fella. And that can actually contribute to some of this stuff because, like I said, if your hormones aren't in order, you're going to be missing parts of your drive. Your mood won't be what it could be. You probably won't be as assertive as you could be, and you won't take initiative. And so it's maybe not their fault that this is what's happened, but look at the testosterone levels of our grandparents' generation. It has dropped drastically since then. And you can't say that doesn't have an impact. It absolutely does. What's causing it? I would say many factors: sedentary lifestyle, microplastics, all the things they put in the foods. Many things are contributing, but it absolutely impacts a lot of things.
We're confused, and we kind of need a voice in this wilderness, and you are that, and that's why this conversation is so important. So
Wow.
thank you.
Can I just ask you this,
Yeah.
Max? Do your friends say that to each other, or how is that expressed?
This is something that we text each other late at night. This is not something we talk about out in the open. These are conversations that we have, over the safety of a digital wall. And this is something that is really hard for us to talk to each other about face to face out in the open.
And what are you all actually saying? Because the use of the word lonely, I mean, I've never heard, young
Yeah.
men say, I am lonely. So are people texting each other saying, I'm lonely, or are they saying what?
I mean, you've mentioned that it took you forever to cry. I remember the last time one of my male friends texted me, I just cried for the first time in years. And it's out of desperation. Yes, I'm lonely. I don't know what I'm doing with my life.
Huh.
It's desperation.
Okay.
And so, what I would say to this guy is, one, you got to find a community of people that you can talk to and open up to, whatever it is, people that you can be honest with, etc. And if you have a good group of guy friends, what they're going to do is they're going to call you out on your shit sometimes, and they're going to help you to move forward in life. But some of this comes down to attitude as well. If you have the wrong attitude about things, you are not going to be helped. It's going to be so difficult to help someone that has the wrong attitude. And you see how this can become a cycle, like a cycle of an issue here, where the attitude's the problem, but you can't help them if they have the wrong attitude. And so it's like, uh-oh, what do you do now? It can be frustrating to help those kinds of people. But what he would need to do is try to find a community. And maybe you start with trying to get in good shape. Start some exercise. Make sure you sleep well. Make sure you try to eliminate bad habits. If you have struggles with addictions, whether it's nicotine, alcohol, drugs, do your best to eliminate those. There's all sorts of things that go into this. Yeah, it's not good, right, Nick? So this is interesting that you said this, though. I'll put it up here. I always say the competitive drive of testosterone is secondary to the compulsive drive of fight-flight response. What exactly do you mean by that? I'm trying to understand what that means. So you say the fight-flight response is first, and you can add freeze, fawn in there too. But yeah, if you could explain what you mean by that, that'd be good. Uh-oh, Ellie's going to say the obvious. Nick says, looks like a pick-me. And again, I catch myself sounding like my dad in some of these things here too. When people get destabilized, they compulsively do things to stabilize. Okay, that makes sense to me. People get destabilized. Yeah, I mean, and that's where we have to be good, right? We have to have a good sense of mental health. And again, mental health is one of the hardest things to help, because I'm someone, I had undiagnosed autism. I had mood disorders, anxiety, depression. And until you get into a good place with them, it is so difficult to be happy. It is so difficult to do what's best for you. And granted, not everyone has a mental health issue, right? Not everyone has a mood disorder, but I did. And it seems like there's a lot of people that might have a low dose mood disorder here, but not every young man that's struggling is because of mental health. But when you hear things like they're lonely, what I would first say is, do you have a good group of friends? Do you have goals? Do you have things that are fulfilling you? Like, there's so many things to go through. You got to go through a checklist with some of this stuff. And we're going to see what Scott Galloway has to say about it. I mean, some of them need a little bit of a kick in the butt, honestly. And then there's other men that need the opposite. They need a little more compassion. They need to learn a little more emotional intelligence, and they need to learn how to take accountability and open up a little more. But depending on where the man is, what I would say to them is going to be a little bit different.
Thank you so much. Alfer.
Hello.
Hi.
I think something that really is something that I would focus on pertaining to this issue is a need for role models and within our communities. I grew up in Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn, and there was an absence at the time of role models within my neighborhood. Of course, I grew up in a single-parent household, but I did have a relationship with my father. But extended role models to look to and to glean from this, it was a dig. And you speak a lot about it, because sometimes it's really, really hard to see where you can't go a certain place if you don't see it. And you want to be able to see where you can go. So I think role models is a really important part of growing up and doing well and finding your place in the community.
Thanks, Alfer.
And I agree with that. I think it's important for men to see men that are doing well. And then a lot of times, if they're single parent households, they don't spend as much time with their dad. But I would say this in regards to that. It's not even as much about how much time you spend with your dad. It is more about how much quality time do you spend with your dad and how is your relationship with your dad. That is much more important to me than how much time. You could have a dad that's there and present all the time, but if he's a slug and he doesn't communicate with his son at all, he's not teaching him any lessons and not trying to help him get prepared for life, it's like, how good is that? And the answer would be, it's not. Yeah, and the answer would be, that's not good at all.
Well, my guest that you're referring to has been sounding the alarm about young men in America. As a father of two sons, he speaks, and he says he grapples with this thought. How do I figure out a way to raise confident, decent young men? And I'm sure a lot of you have had that thought for yourselves. That question became the guiding force for his newest book. And let me tell you, it's an amazingly, really profound, thoughtful book. And if you are a man, you're going to want to read it. And if you're a woman, you want to send it to every man you know. It's called Notes on Being a Man. Fantastic title, by the way.
Thank you.
Welcome, entrepreneur, best-selling author, NYU professor, and podcaster extraordinaire, Scott Galloway.
And that's a book I haven't read, but I would read it to see what he has to say. And I imagine he's going to go through a little bit of a summary here.
Scott.
Thank you. Thank you.
You say that what's happening to men is a 5-alarm fire for men in the United States. Tell us what's going on as you see it.
Well, the statistics are pretty stark. If you walk into a morgue and there's 5 people who've died by suicide, 4 are men. 3 times as like, we have a homeless problem and an opiate problem, but what we really have is a male homeless and a male opiate problem. 3 times as likely to be addicted, 3 times as likely to be homeless, 12 times as likely to be incarcerated. More single women own homes than single men. Women in urban areas are making more money. And let me be clear, we should do nothing to get in the way of that. But if our young men continue to flail, our country and women aren't going to continue to flourish. And just a couple of things you brought up, loneliness and then role models. 1 out of 4 men can't name a best friend. 1 out of 7 men don't have a single friend. And what I would say is there's a lot of factors around this, but something to be cognizant of is that...
Can I just stop you for a second?
Yeah.
Is that unusual? Is that new?
It's getting worse. And typically when a man isn't in... Women are relationally more invested or more talented establishing relationships. And typically they use their friends as a means of gaining confidence to enter into a romantic relationship. Whereas a man, if he doesn't have a relationship by the time he's 30, there's a 1 in 3 chance he'll be a substance abuser. And also, there's a cartoon Oprah of the poor woman in her 30s that didn't find romantic love, and she's in a big sweater looking out on a rainy day, listening to sad music. What a tragedy. That's a cartoon. The reality is men need relationships much more than women. Widows are happier after their husband dies. Widowers, it's true, widowers are less happy. Women.
And that depends. To me, that's a little bit of a generalization. And okay, if the guy who dies was abusing her, yeah, sure. The widower is going to be much happier at that point. But I would argue also, if the man's being abused by the woman, the same would also be true in that case as well. But he mentioned friends. Friends is super important. You got to have people you talk to. I mean, we're social creatures. And at the very least, I think friends are super important.
Men live longer in relationships. They live 2 to 4 years longer. Men live 4 to 7 years longer. So men actually need relationships more. What I would argue, or what I would be cognizant of the fact when you're talking about loneliness, is you're up against the deepest pocketed, most talented companies in the world with godlike technology who are trying to do one thing, and that is sequester you from your other relationships. They're either trying to get you to glued to the phone, and one of the ways they glue you to the phone is by enraging you, elevating content that makes you angry at your neighbor, elevate content that makes you start blaming the other gender or blaming immigrants for your problems.
And this is being done on purpose.
Well, they didn't start out as malicious, but I'm in marketing. We used to think that it was sex that sells. Then the algorithms found something that sells even more in terms of gluing you to a screen, and that is rage. So I'm not suggesting we censor these folks, but they will elevate content. They will figure out your political leanings, your fears, and then start elevating content that enrages you, because enragement equals engagement equals shareholder values.
And so a good point about this. This is what I think the elites are doing. The elites, they want people glued to their phones. They want people divided. They want people divided anyway, but by class. So they'll put social issues in the way, gender wars. Are you pro-guns? Are you pro-abortion? LGBTQ? Fill in the blank with any kind of social issues. They're used to divide. Political issues as well. Republican versus Democrat, conservative versus progressive. Now, notice one of the best ways to keep people glued is to talk about one of those issues, and people can't help themselves but to get angry, give their opinions, etc. And then you're playing right into the social media algorithm's hands. As I always say, the social media algorithm is just like a narcissist because it rewards narcissistic behaviors. What it hates is being ignored. So a piece of content that's ignored, the social media algorithm doesn't like that. But a piece of content that triggers someone, a piece of content that pisses someone off, a piece of content that is really engagement worthy, the social media algorithm loves that. And yes, sex is included in that too. I see on Instagram, there's all sorts of Instagram girls they're bombarding out there these days, and it still gets attention. Something I noticed by med students is how easily destabilized they are. And that's not good. I mean, we got to have emotional self-control. We got to be able to be good and have our emotions, feel our emotions, accept them, but then learn to respond to them rather than react. That's what I would say.
So keep in mind, the amount of time you spend on a screen as a young man, and biologically, your prefrontal cortex isn't as developed as a woman. It doesn't catch up until you're 25. The executive function, the need for dopa, is much more dangerous in a young man. Keep in mind that you will find they are trying to essentially convince you can have a reasonable facsimile of life on a screen. So keep in mind, you are up against a foe that is trying to separate you from the outside world. And very simply, mathematically, the more time you spend on a screen, the less likely you are to have loving relationships, the less money you're going to make, the more likely you are going to be to engage in self-harm, the more likely you are going to blame other people. In sum, the worse your life gets based on how much time you spend on a screen. We are mammals. We are meant to be outside and in the company of others. And we have for-profit companies trying to convince you to go the other way. So you're up against some very significant foes. On the idea of role models, the single point of failure, if you reverse engineered a boy coming off the tracks, is when he loses a male role model through either death, divorce, or abandonment. We have more single-parent homes than any nation in the world other than Sweden. And what's interesting is that girls in single-parent homes have the same outcome, same rates of college attendance, same income as dual-parent homes. A boy, when he loses a male role model, at that moment is more likely to be incarcerated than graduate from college. What it ends up is that while boys are physically stronger, they're emotionally and mentally much weaker. And what we need, quite frankly, is we need more men to step up and fill the void. There are 3 times as many women applying to be big sisters in New York as there are men applying to be big brothers.
And so I used to be a good brother for this very reason. I used to mentor kids that were taken by DIPAS. That's Child Protective Services, because their parents were addicts. And there were several kids that I would mentor, and they were in some pretty bad situations. It wasn't very easy for them. Now, to the screen time point that they made, I do agree with that. I mean, personally, I make money from creating content, and it helps my businesses. That being said, that's not the case for everybody. Not everyone's making money. A lot of people, when they're scrolling, it's almost like it can be just a waste of time. Now, that doesn't mean there's not things to learn online. There absolutely is. I try to be a positive benefit, a influence for good in the online space. I absolutely try to be. So that's just another thing to pay attention to there. And again, and to the single parent note, I think single mothers in particular, because usually it's the mother that gets custody of the kids, or at least the majority of it. I think the single mothers, they parent their daughters a little bit differently than they parent their sons. A lot of times they had a bad experience with the father a lot of times. And so they teach their daughter, don't ever rely on a man. You don't want to be in a situation where you have to rely on a man for anything. And they teach them to be strong and independent. But unfortunately, a lot of times that same lesson does not get applied to young boys. And I think there's some, not all, but some single mothers that coddle their sons. And when sons are coddled, that is one of the worst things for them, because a lot of these parents, and fathers can be guilty of this too, but if you try to eliminate all of the obstacles from your son's path, they never develop the strength and learn how to overcome adversity. They never have to overcome any challenges. They never learn to build resilience. And especially for a boy, that's super important. Now, of course, this doesn't mean, oh, you let them fend for themselves completely and you neglect them. No, that's not what it means. It means there should be a balance where they have to learn this stuff, because especially as a guy, life is going to punch us in the face. And what are we going to do when that happens? And I guarantee you it's going to happen. So as a parent, you would have to know that, okay, life's going to punch my kid in the face. And rather than try to wish it won't happen, because that's not realistic, let's prepare my son, and prepare my daughter for that matter too, to be strong enough to handle that. Because I think some of what you see in some of these sons is life has punched them in the face a little bit, and now they don't know what to do. They're like, oh no, I don't know how to handle this. I've never had to overcome adversity. I've never had to overcome challenges. And now I'm just devastated from this one thing. And that could be a little bit of a generalization, but I do think that happens a lot. So coddling, no good, especially for boys.
So we have an obligation to get involved in a young man's life, right? And it's just to summarize here, if we want better men, we have to be better men.
Well, I have to say, I think of this book, Notes on Being a Man, as a guidebook, and from your personal perspective, for how men can begin to show up in the world. You talk about that, everything from fitness to nutrition to money to work, and how to meet women. The thing that struck me was that men 18 to 25, 45% of men 18 to 25 have not engaged personally on asking a woman out for a date, or I find that to be shocking.
Almost half of young men have never asked a woman out in person. And there's a bunch of factors around that. One, it's difficult. I mean, it's just not easy. One of the key skills I think a man has to treat or try and give his son is to how to express romantic interest while making that person feel safe. And this is only anecdotal evidence. When I go out and I'm in social situations, I'll have women approach me and say, I'm here, I'm single and I'm ready to mingle, I look amazing, and a man hasn't approached me in 3 months, right? And 80% of women still expect the man to make that initial approach. And also, to a certain extent, men's interest in romantic and sexual relationships has been pathologized. Like there's something wrong if you want to meet women and ultimately have sex. And I think we need to start celebrating it, because a man's desire to be in a relationship and, quite frankly, to have physical encounters is fire. And that is, it can be destructive. You spend too much time with porn, you start objectifying women, it can lead to misogynist or dangerous places. But that fire can also be captured in an engine and create tremendous progress. Wanting to have sex, if channeled correctly, which it is for most men, makes you want to dress better, smell better, have a kindness practice, have your act together, develop the resilience and the confidence to approach someone, and maybe they're not interested. And guess what? You're both going to be fine.
And that's a good point by him there, too. I think if channeled properly, our sexual energy is the same energy of our creative energy. It's our purpose. But if you squander your sexual energy, then you're depleted as a man. And so it's important to be able to harness that. And it's just a natural thing to want to be with women. Now, I think what happens to some guys is if they listen to women too much in their social circles, there can be some of them that have a little bit of like demonizing of men going on. And they'll talk about all the bad things that men do, and they'll get really repulsed by guys' sex drive, etc. But if you listen to that too much, I don't think that's necessarily good for especially younger guys to hear, because they can internalize that. And then when they catch themselves having a sex drive, they might feel shame because they listened to the girls talking about sex drive and how much they hated certain things that men did. And sure, those girls can have a point in some regards, but as a guy, it's not something to be ashamed of. That's what I would say. And I'd want to emphasize that. But it's also important to harness it correctly. It's important to harness it in a mature way as well. A lot of this requires balance and nuance, which of course online is pretty difficult to come by.
These are key attributes. We need to celebrate men wanting to have relationships and making an approach. And if you don't develop those skills and that resilience and those calluses from rejection, you're going to struggle in other parts of your life. So the most rewarding thing in life is relationships, full stop. And I think the most rewarding relationship is building a life with someone and having kids. I'm not saying you have to have that to be happy. And quite frankly, just to be raw about this, when I saw my partner who I've had kids with, I wasn't thinking I'd really like lower rates on auto insurance. I was thinking, just to be blunt, I would really like to have sex with her. And that forced me to be a better person, to try to have a kindness practice, to demonstrate excellence. And 18 months later, we had our first son.
And I think it's okay. It's good for men to hear that he owns that part of himself and he knows, okay, I'm not going to be inappropriate about it, but it's just a natural desire. If you boil down the purposes of humans to one thing, it's to procreate. And for men, that means one thing. And for women, that means another thing. So to simply own that sex drive, to me, it's super important.
So let's stop demonizing men for...
Oh, and one more thing. I interviewed a guy named Justin Nault today, and we talked about some of this stuff. We talked about a little bit of men's issues. We talked about hustle culture and the problems with that and how a lot of that can be a trauma response. We talked for a long time. We talked about a lot of different things. That interview will be uploaded tomorrow, so keep your eyes open for that.
Wanting to procreate. It's a wonderful thing as long as you channel it into wanting to be a better man. The only thing I can guarantee you is that anything wonderful in your life is going to have a lot of no's. Full stop. And unfortunately, men aren't getting to know because they're afraid to, or they have what they think is a cheap substitute for these relationships online.
And that's true. Anything worth getting, you're going to get rejected. You're going to get told no. And that's where the resilience comes into play, right? Where if you try to ask out women, you're going to get rejected. You go on a dating app, you're going to get rejected. But what's the story you tell yourself when you get rejected? That's everything. Some guys will tell themselves the story, oh, that means I'm worthless. See, this one person I like didn't like me, so that's going to prove my lack of worth to myself. But other people will say, like they say in sales, oh, every no is one step closer to a yes. Or, oh, no great loss. She just didn't see my worth. But that doesn't mean that other people won't see my worth. As long as I see my worth and practice radical self-respect, that's what's most important. And other times, the lesson is, well, there's things I can be doing better. And most women won't tell you what those things are, but hopefully other men will. Where, hey, maybe you need to learn to dress better. Maybe you need to get in shape. Got to hit the gym a little bit. Maybe you need to work on your social calibration. Maybe you need to learn just your conversation skills. Maybe you need to learn how to flirt. Maybe you need to learn to be more comfortable in your own skin. It can be any number of things. But for a lot of young guys, it can be overwhelming. And so rather than focus on this stuff, because It's not easy. It takes work. They'll just gravitate towards the more MGTOW way of life and say, screw them. The juice isn't worth the squeeze, as they'll say. To which I'll say, you know what? I don't care what people do as long as you're really honest with yourself about it. And I think what happens to a lot of the MGTOW folks is if they could do better with women, or if they thought they could, they would. But they don't think they can, so they just say, screw it. And to be clear, I don't think that's what this audience is here for the most part. But online, there's a lot of them.
Let's talk for a moment about your younger years, your parents, and what happened between them and your life after their divorce. That was all a huge, huge influence on you. How did your mother and father shape who you are as a man?
I was raised by a single immigrant mother, lived and died a secretary a lot of my life, right? And my father, like a lot of us, was a very handsome Scotsman, not very sophisticated, left at the age of 13. And just to be crude, he was a handsome man with a Scottish accent in 70s California, which meant he could not only think with his dick, he could listen to it. He was married and divorced. I can't believe I just said that on Oprah.
Yeah.
Oprah. Oprah is the only woman in this group here.
He was married and divorced.
I can see how you could think with it. I'm just trying to understand how he listens to it. But anyway, okay.
Married and divorced 4 times. Started his 3rd marriage while he was still married to my mom. My father was not an especially high character person in terms of how he treated women and how he treated my mom. And so not having a male role model around, he moved away. I think took quite frankly, a toll on me. But what the worst part about it was he wasn't very good to my mom. He wasn't nice. And the lesson I carry forward as a father, I do think the best thing you can do to raise good men, quite frankly, is just to be a very loving, supportive partner. You want good men who are more secure and better in relationships, they will model you. You can tell them whatever you want. They're just going to watch what you're doing. The first rule as a man is you need to be very good to their mother. Even if you end up going through divorce, the more generous you are, the kinder you are, I think your sons are going to notice that and going to model it. My mom was, every day, when you get older, you get more thoughtful. That's the good news. The bad news is you get more thoughtful and you start thinking about, how did I get on Oprah, right? Mm. And the way I got on Oprah was, one, I'm a product of big government, the generosity and vision of California taxpayers and the regents of UC. I got to go to UCLA and Berkeley for almost no money, had a 74% admissions rate when I applied. This year was 9%. But also just the irrational passion for my well-being and my mother. Every day, I remember going to lunch with my mom. I was a teenager. I was 5'10" with terrible acne, 110 pounds. And she would literally stop and go, "You are so handsome. I can't get over it." And she would sit there and stare at me. Anyway, if you say to a kid every day in, explicit and implicit ways, "You're wonderful," I think at some point they start to believe that.
Yeah.
So that confidence is still with
That's
me.
really one of the first things I underlined on page 28 when you said, this is something for us all to remember. Having a good person express how wonderful you are hundreds of times changes everything. I was tethered. I'd never thought of it that way before. Having a person express how wonderful you are hundreds of times actually tethers you in a way that nothing else can. Yeah.
Yeah, I was grounded. And the thing is, and it goes back to mentorship, and there's a lot of men in this audience. And by virtue of the fact you're here, you probably have your act together more than you realize.
Yeah.
And there's a fear that you need to be a CEO or a baller or an adolescent psychiatrist to get involved in a young man's life. It is so easy to add value. What I would suggest is masculinity is taking care of yourself, taking care of your community, taking care of your country. But I think the ultimate expression of masculinity is to get involved in a young man's life. And the place to start is with single mothers in your workplace. You want to come over and watch a ball game. Would you like to hang out? I'm washing my car this weekend. Would you like to come over? But that really is the single point. And even just saying that boys needed men a few years ago was seen as triggering. What, women can't raise men? Of course they can. But the research is clear. Boys need men, and there's an absence of them in our society, right?
Now, I agree with an element of this. I do think it's great to give back to the community. I used to do the same thing. I used to be a big brother for the Big Brothers Big Sisters program. And I think there's many ways to give value. It's not just about your financial value. Like, for example, this is something I talked about in the interview I did with Justin today. Alex Hermosi, he's great at making money in the gym, but that's just two areas of life. He might not be any good at parenting. He might not be any good at other aspects of life. So other people that might not be doing as well in the money game or the gym game, they can still help men in other areas. Everyone has their own gifts to give. And I think we have to know what our gifts are. When we recognize them and own them, then we're able to give them to the world. And to me, that's a big part of what the masculine is all about: purpose and mission. And I know a lot of people have problems with those words because they think they're antiquated. But to me, that's what masculine energy is. It's all about mission and purpose. And part of what we can do is, if we don't have a girlfriend or wife, we can try to take care of the people around us in some way and provide containment for the people around us. As Teal Swan would call it, positive masculine containment. Now, the only thing I might disagree with this here, with what he said, is when he says to focus on the single mother's part. Because that's tough. I mean, when it's a single mother, what can happen is that woman's going to put the kid first, and rightfully so. So as a man, you just have to be really honest with yourself. Okay, are you okay with that? If you're going to be in a romantic relationship with one, it's just something that I think a lot of people neglect it, and they think, oh, I'll be okay. And they don't realize what they're getting themselves into. But it's a big thing. It's not some small thing.
No.
Yeah, I remember years ago doing a show and a lot of women, single mothers, getting offended when the experts said at that time that you can be a great mother, but you can't be a father, because a lot of mothers think that they are also the fathers, but men need male role models, period. That's what you're
Yeah.
saying.
100%. And also, to be clear, I think that masculine, we talk in the book about masculine and feminine energy, that masculine energy can be brought in a household headed by two women. That feminine energy can be brought, that mix. I think the mix of masculine and feminine energy is the greatest alliance in history. The genders have done a great job of convincing themselves that it's the other gender's fault. And I hold on to that the greatest alliance in history is a mix of the wonderful kind of healing, nurturing gracefulness of femininity and the more risk aggressive, more what I'll call protective instincts of masculine energy.
And that's the thing. Whether it's a gay relationship or lesbian relationship, everyone has both in them to an extent. So as a man, it's not like they're 100% masculine, 0% feminine. There's a percentage, and maybe it's 70% masculine, 30% feminine. But there can also be guys that I think that are more feminine than they are masculine, and the same applies to women. There can be women that are 80% feminine, 20% masculine, but that can also be reversed in terms of energy as well. But I don't have a problem speaking like this. A lot of people get really triggered just even hearing those words. But ultimately, men and women are supposed to complement one another. Our strengths are supposed to complement their weaknesses and vice versa. And I don't think it shouldn't even be a problem to say that. But there are some people, they don't want to think that the other gender can do anything for them. Oh, I don't need them at all. It's like, well, there's such a thing called synergy when we can create more with someone else than we can by ourselves. That's called being interdependent, as Stephen Covey would call it. And like he also mentioned, the gender war right now online is great for business. I look on Facebook and I see people like Chris Perry, Matthew Coast, and then other like women feminists. They'll just bash men. It's all their fault. It's all their fault. Women are perfect. It's all men's fault. And they kill it. So they're getting rewarded by the social media algorithm. They're getting money. They're getting attention. They're even getting some status. But is it really helping people? Not really. I mean, it can be validating to hear that kind of message when you're first getting out of an abusive relationship. But it has its limits, because the growth is stage 2 of healing. The growth is looking at our side of the street. It doesn't mean what happened to us is our fault, but that's where our growth is. We can't change anyone else except for ourselves. So that's one of the big negatives of the gender war, is how it's pitted the genders against one another. And this looks a certain way in men. That's where the MGTOW men come from. Some of them might be incels, etc. And then with women, it comes to the bashing of men. Now, it's much more socially acceptable to bash men than it is to bash women. The ones that bash women, they have to seclude themselves in a corner of the internet.
But I want to be clear, neither of those attributes are sequestered to people born as men or women. My closest male friends tend to be more feminine in nature. I'm drawn to men who are more
What does
caring.
happen? So thank you for this to thrive. I'll put it up here. The most important thing a father can do for his children is to love their mother. Theodore Hesburgh. Now imagine having a narc dad. Oof. Oof is right. And I absolutely agree. Because when a father loves the mother correctly and he provides positive masculine containment, that's the example that he's setting for them. Okay. So the children, whether it's a son, oh, this is how you're supposed to treat women. If it's a daughter, oh, this is how a man's supposed to treat me. But if it's a narcissistic dad, what is that person doing? Oh, making their kids earn their love and affection. It's very conditional. They'll be hot and cold. There will be intermittent rewards. It's all about the image of how things look. It's more important to appear like a good dad than to actually be a good dad. They'll play favorites in the family. They'll have a golden child that they'll put on the pedestal, even though it's conditional, but they'll still do it. And then they'll have a scapegoat that they blame everything on. The scapegoat, as Christian John says, becomes the receptacle of all the family shit. Yeah, that's what a narc parent will do. Narcissistic mother is one version. Narcissistic father is another version. Not good any way you swing it.
But I do think masculinity comes easier to people born as males. And that if they need a code, they can lean into an aspirational form of masculinity. I think that we all need a code. And I think young men are desperate for some sort of guardrails.
True. But one more thing here. So Kat says, a lot of women are forced into their masculine because men want to act feminine. That is 100% true. When a man is incompetent and he doesn't step up, the woman feels the need to step up and become the masculine instead. And that's when the woman might act a little more irritable, or to the man who doesn't know any better, he might call it unpleasant. But that's exactly what will happen. Now, Kat, Matthew Coast, to me, he's bashing men a lot, and he's not wrong with everything that he says, but like, I don't know. I don't know about him. I think he's capitalizing on the bashing men movement. He knows that there's a lot of women that love to hear that, and he's making bank. He's making bank. He's got 2.6 million followers on Facebook. He's killing it. And again, I think that's good in the beginning if you're just getting out of a toxic relationship. But there comes a point with people like him, he'll never say to a woman, like, you need to do anything better. It's just always the man. It's always the man that's the problem. And sometimes that's true. Sometimes that's true. Oh, he certainly does that, Kat. That's for sure. I feel so grateful my parents love each other and I was given a better example than most. Yeah, that's a good example to see. And he does do that, Kat. He definitely does give the advice. I think what annoys me about him is he says all of these subtly antagonistic things towards men. And then if men get upset about it, he goes, oh, you just proved my point. You proved my point. And it's kind of true. It can be kind of true because my definition of confidence is not getting easily triggered. You can hear different opinions. You can hear people even being subtly antagonistic, and you'll be okay. Now, the flip side of the coin is, and I've done this experiment, if you swap the genders on a Matthew Coast post, women get mad instead. So the same men that you would see get mad at Matthew Coast, women would get mad if someone has swapped the genders and talks about women in that way. So it's just something to keep in mind. I've done that experiment.
Okay. On page 137, you say every man needs to develop a code, a series of adjectives or behaviors that guide and define his everyday behavior. So how do young men develop a code amidst so much, divisiveness and distractions? How do you get a code?
A code is very important for a man. Part of my code is practicing radical self-respect. Like, that's my utmost code. But beyond that, what I recommend people do, men and women both, is you write your personal constitution of your morals and values that are important to you. And you strive for them, whatever they are. And this doesn't mean you're going to do it perfectly, but it's important to strive for something. Strive for ideals of how we want to live our life. And that involves having character, trying to live by principles. That's super important. So everyone has different principles that are important to them, but it's important to be striving towards something.
Well, people get it from different places. They can get it from their religion.
Yeah.
They can get it from the military. They can get it from their family. I got my first code, I would argue, from my workplace. There was just a way you approached work and other people, and that was very helpful to me. But what I put forward in the book is I think masculinity can serve as a code, but an aspirational vision of it, specifically be a provider. I think every man at the outset of his career should assume at some point he might have to take economic responsibility for his household.
Because you believe that's one of the tenets of being a man.
Well, I think in a capitalist society, men are disproportionately evaluated on their economic viability and also the way men evaluate themselves. And if you're not economically viable, I think you're going to have a tough time having the self-esteem, having society respect you, and quite frankly, attracting mates. And we don't like to say this out loud, but 75% of women say economic viability is key to a mate. Only 25% of men say this about women. So the reality is, as much as we'd like to think it doesn't matter, when the woman starts making more money than the man in a household, the likelihood of divorce doubles. The use of erectile dysfunction drugs triples because the man feels worse about himself. I am not suggesting that we do anything to get in the way of women's ascent economically. It's wonderful. We need it. Quite frankly, it won World War II because we put women in factories, and it has saved our economy that women are killing it. It's an amazing thing. But as a man, you should assume at the beginning you need to find the certification and demonstrate the discipline and the will to be economically viable. And sometimes that means getting out of the way of your partner and being more supportive of her because she happens to be better at that money thing than you. That is also a form of masculinity. But I hold on to the fact, if you are not economically viable as a man in this economy, in this society, I'm not saying it should be this way, but it is, you are going to struggle. You're going to struggle in terms of what society thinks of you, what you think of yourself, and quite frankly, what a lot of women think of you. Being a provider, too.
And that's true. I mean, and like you said, when a woman starts to make more than a man, the likelihood of divorce doubles. It just is what it is. Because a lot of women would rather be with a man that is doing better than them. That's just reality a lot of times. And they don't want to be in the position where they're making more. Now, he's telling men to be more supportive in the cases where that is the case. Okay. If that's what somebody wants to do, I'm not going to tell them not to do it. But me personally, like, I want to be in a good place myself where I can take care of the people around me. That's what I strive for.
Protector. The whole point of prosperity, the whole shooting match, is such that you can move to being a protector. Think about the most masculine jobs: fireman, cop, military. At the end of the day, they protect. And then the ultimate expression of masculinity, planting trees the shade of which you will never sit under. You want to be a provider, you want to be a protector, and you want to be a procreator. And I think that vision of masculinity as a code can serve as really wonderful guardrails for a young man.
And it's better than no guardrails at all. That's for sure. And those aren't the worst guardrails. And honestly, that's a little bit of what creating content is. It is planting trees that you'll never see the shade of. This content on YouTube and wherever else I post content, it's here forever, as far as I know. It won't always be here. Unless something happens, I think it's always going to be here for future generations. So that's kind of a cool thing when you think about it.
Introduction, you say you heard from a lot of moms who say something like, I have a daughter who lives in Chicago, works at PR, and another daughter who's at Penn. My son lives in our basement, vapes, and plays video games. You believe that a lot of mothers are also the ones who are sounding the alarms on what's going on with young.
Let me ask this question that Kat asked. So Kat says, do you think this also applies to autistic men, that if high functioning, they should also provide for a woman/family, or it's acceptable for them to have limitations and be in their feminine? That's a hard question to answer generally. It would be up to each individual person. So for some autistic men, I think maybe they'll be better at stepping up and being more masculine. Other times, depending on the level of severity of autism they have and their level of social calibration, it might be more difficult for them. But then there's also people like Elon Musk. Yeah, they might not be socially calibrated, but they're kind of a savant. They're a savant in other areas, so they do very well financially. And they created their businesses, even though they created them because they had government subsidies. But yeah, I mean, it's a good question. It depends on the person. I think with autistic men, the first step is, in terms of dating, becoming socially calibrated. That's what a lot of autistic guys would struggle with. And then figuring out their way in the world. Okay, what are you going to do with yourself? What's going to be your career? What's going to be your purpose? And you have to work with what your temperament is. A lot of autistic people, they're not really big into being social and having to be an extrovert all the time. They're better off working with things a lot of times. That's why you'll see them work in IT or in games, etc. That won't be all of them, but I do see that be a lot of them. So everyone just has to know themselves. But it's a very good question, Kat. The mothers are enablers of their sons? Yes. Yes, they can be. Elon Musk is validation seeking. His father became everyone else. Yes. Elon Musk, I'm not necessarily a fan of Elon Musk. He's one of those ones that is autistic, but I also think he's narcissistic too. And that got me a lot of backlash when I said that on Instagram. People are like, ah. And I'm like, dude, I just think he is. He shows some of the qualities of that. He's almost like a comorbid version.
Men.
The dialogue, Oprah, has gotten so much more productive. 5 years ago, when I saw this data and I started talking about it, the reaction was pretty much a gag reflex. Because the reality is, people who look and smell and feel like me have had a 3,000-year head start. From 1945 to 2000, America registered a third of all economic growth, which is 5% of the population. So we had 6 times the prosperity in America. And then all of that prosperity was essentially shoved into a third of the population that was white, male, and heterosexual. So I have had gale force hurricane winds in my sails. I have had unfair advantage. The problem is that we are holding 19-year-old men accountable for my privilege. They do not benefit from the same unfair advantage that I had. And that's probably a good thing, but we are holding them accountable. Young men are on any metric really struggling. And the alliance between men and women needs to be restored such that we can be the afterburners for their success and their ascent as women. But also, I do think women play a role in not falling into this trap of thinking, well, you've had a 3,000-year head start. I don't feel sorry for you. You know who wants more economically and emotionally viable young men? Women.
So let's bring in more.
And that's true. Women would benefit from men being successful as well. But here's the other thing. There's just men who aren't going to do well in the dating world. And the more freedom and choices women have, the more men that might just not do well. That's just an uncomfortable truth because you can't have both. It's not going to be an equal culture for women and male dating equality at the same time. It's just not reality. So given that it's the way it is, there's going to be like men that struggle and fail. That's how it's always been. And there's always been more men that have struggled and failed throughout history in terms of dating success. That's why you're more likely to have more female ancestors than male ancestors. But that being said, I'm not saying to have a pity party for men. It's just, it becomes survival of the fittest. The men that are the strongest and do the best they can, they are the more likely to succeed. And this is where women would have to be careful. A lot of narcissistic guys, they do well in a lot of these metrics. So that's something they have to pay attention to.
More of the men in our audience. Let's take a look at this video that Brandon posted on Instagram.
I don't know if I'll ever be a husband or a father. And that really, really hurts me because that's all I've wanted since I was a kid. And it eats at you. And you wonder if you're ever going to get what everyone else has. If you're good enough, if you deserve it, if it's something that's meant for you. And I've had to come to terms with maybe it's not. And while that brings tears to my eyes and makes me as sad as someone could be, you just got to trust God's plan. But I can still dream.
Brandon, why do you think you feel that way? What's behind it?
I've struggled with that alone feeling my entire life. I got to live my dream job as a sports reporter on TV, and people would see me on NFL sidelines interviewing the biggest stars. But behind the scenes, I was struggling with that alone feeling. I thought I met my wife, the woman I was going to have kids with. And unfortunately, it was a really toxic relationship and breakup. And it put me at a spot where I was suicidal and didn't want to live anymore. And so I had to check into a hospital, get help. And I realized for the first time that I wasn't alone. And I took that moment and I decided to, similar to what you're doing, be hopefully a vulnerable man that can help others. And so I created the Mental Game, where I interview athletes and celebrities like Terry Crews, Nate Burleson, Kevin Gates, these men who you think might not have any problems in the world. And they struggle with the same things as me and other men in this room. And I also go all over the country and try to speak. We've been to 46 states, spoken to over 250,000 kids, adults, men, women, just trying to show that, look, it's okay to be alone and to be vulnerable as men, but you have to show those emotions. You know, I watched my dad my entire life hold it all in. And it wasn't until the night that I called him and said, hey, I'm going to take my own life, that we ever talked about mental health.
So is all that talking and speaking about it, has it helped you resolve your own?
Yeah, I mean, I was emotional watching that video. We locked eyes as soon as it started playing, because I posted that 3 weeks ago on a Friday night, not thinking it would do anything. And it had 5 million views when I woke up. Because I think a lot of other men felt just like me. So it is like therapy. I go to therapy. I spent 2 weeks in the hospital. This has become my purpose to help myself and others. But I think what I've learned traveling the country and working with these athletes and celebrities and just anyone that's struggling with their mental health, specifically men, is a lot of us feel the same way as I did in that video. And that's why it went viral. But we're scared of what our peers, other men in the room, women will think of us. I mean, I gave up on dating. I want to get married. I want to have kids one day. But since, you know, I lost who I thought was going to be my wife and the mother to my children, I kind of put all that energy in me. And so I'm not on dating apps. I don't, the rejection thing, that's the biggest thing I'm scared of. I would never go up to someone at a bar and say, hey, you're beautiful, let me buy you a cup of coffee. I don't drink anymore. I'm sober. I struggle with addiction. And maybe in my younger days in college, I'm cool. All right, you get no, great, go to the next one. Now, as being someone that's 32.
So what Scott said here.
And you know what, though? You listen to him talk. What did you hear? So much fear. I'm scared of this. I'm scared of that. And this is where like faith in something comes into play, where like, where is your faith? Fear is the mind killer, as they say in Dune. And it's like, living in fear is a terrible thing. So what are you going to do to not live in fear? For some people, they'll turn to faith and religion. Some people, they'll turn to spirituality. Some people, they'll try to be in the present moment. Because how afraid can you truly be if you're in the present moment? To say if you're thinking about the future, you might be anxious. If you're thinking about the past, you'll be more depressed. But when I hear that fear stuff, it's like, where is that coming from? Why is everyone so afraid? And I think for men in particular, you have to be on a path, on a trajectory. Even Jordan Peterson talked about this years ago, but on steps to do something with yourself. And it seems like that guy is. He has a successful podcast and he's talking to the athletes that have also struggled. So it's like, where's the disconnect here? And maybe he had a narcissistic woman in his life as well. Maybe if he said it was a toxic relationship, perhaps it's possible he was the toxic one, but I doubt it. Usually guys that sound like him, they're the ones that are more the victim a lot of times. And he's probably with a woman that was more narcissistic, if I had to guess. But it's like, and maybe it's a mental health thing in there too. Maybe there's a hormone thing going on. It could be a bunch of different things. So Kat says, I wonder if narcissism was a thing in caveman days before we could communicate. I'm sure it was. I mean, probably from the days of Adam and Eve. The asshole. I love it. There was, as long as there was humans, there's probably freaking asshole cavemen. But the thing about assholes is, this is the thing. A lot of these guys here, they're the opposite of the assholes. And here's the thing, like you say assholes are assholes, but they're not all bad a lot of times. A lot of times they know how to have fun. A lot of times they know how to just like pick themselves up and keep on going. Now, you can say they have other problems, but some of these guys could probably learn a little bit from assholes, honestly, which is probably not politically correct to say, but I think it's also true.
Earlier about rejection, how did that land with you?
I mean, it hit hard because, like, it's funny. My professional life, I took all of the risk I could possibly do, leaving a job as an NFL reporter and starting my own thing.
Mm-hmm.
Personal life, I have no interest in that, just because of that fear. And so rather than risk that, I'd rather pour that energy into myself, going to the gym, working on my business, working on my mental health.
Yeah.
I think loving yourself, I didn't love myself until like a year and a half ago. And it took me a long time to get to that point.
It's more important to be the right person than to find the right person. And I think learning to love ourselves is a never-ending process, but accepting ourselves, owning who we are, accepting the things that we cannot change and have the courage to change the things we can and the wisdom to know the difference, that's what it's all about. I mean, it sounds like he's doing the right things. So I would wonder where what I would ask him is, where's this fear coming from? Like, what is your ultimate fear and why do you think you're feeling it? Is it a fear of failure? Is it a fear of rejection? Like, what's going on here? And honestly, and this is probably going to get me some hate, but some of these guys, it's like they need a little bit more of that tough love sometimes. And people are going to say, well, Jared, that's the problem. They've only gotten tough love. It's like, did they really get that? Or do they get more just someone who is just a jerk? But if you get someone who's on your side and you know they're on your side, you can be a little tougher in that regard because sometimes that's what they need. The validation alone, especially in men, it has its limits. So we can't be afraid of those uncomfortable feelings sometimes. That's where the growth is. So again, is that going to be what every man needs? No. But some of them, I listen to it and I hear myself thinking like my dad. And my dad would be, and honestly, my dad's actually changed a little bit his thoughts on it. He's actually eased up. But back when I was growing up, he'd be like, nope, go, 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 move, move, move. And like I've taken some of that and integrated it into who I am today. But back then I didn't like it either. So I get it.
Okay, what's your question for Scott?
I think for me, it bounces off that of how can you balance loving yourself, but also trying to find that person to love. I feel like for the first time, like I said, I do love myself and I'm ready to date. I want to get married one day and be a father and have kids. But it's like, how do you balance the two? Can you do both at the same time?
So I just feel like I need to disclose, I have no domain expertise or training in psychiatry. And so when you talk about mental health issues, I can talk to you about my own mental health issues, but I don't ever want to supplant the notion that you should talk to professionals and get real advice. I'm speaking to you as someone who's been through a lot of what you've been through, but my advice is anecdotal. So just that asterisk. I coach a lot of young men, and I have enough respect for you not to PG-13 or whitewash my content. When men usually say, the young men I work with usually want to move out of their parents' house. They want to start making some money. And then ultimately what they end up is like, when they start trusting me, I'd really like a girlfriend. And I go through a series of exercises. And the first thing I ask them is like, would you have sex with you? What do you look like? Do you take your opinion?
What is this? The Silence of the Lambs when the dude's in the mirror? Like, I'd fuck me.
Appearance seriously? Do you have a plan? Do you have a kindness practice? How do you demonstrate excellence? Right? The basis of evolution.
I love the way you talk about, you emphasize kindness so much in Notes on Being a Man.
There are 3 reasons women are attracted to men sexually. And there's a ton of research here. Number 1, and we don't like to talk about this, is the man's ability to signal resources. All right? We don't like to admit that. It's important. Number 2.
Of the 3, that's probably the least important. Let's go on.
2 is intellect. Because instinctively,
kind of.
People who make good decisions for the tribe lives longer. So women are drawn to intellect. The fastest way to communicate in intellect is humor. And just so I can offend everybody.
And that part's true. The humor part will signal more attraction than just the plain intelligence. Because what do women really want? They usually want a guy that's has confidence, is comfortable in his own skin, is charismatic, charming, can have a good sense of humor, and owns who they are, is dominant. It's someone they feel safe in their presence. And some of these things, like it helps if a guy is tall. Like men, often tall men will do better. There's something visceral about that. And for a lot of women, what turns them on is really more visceral a lot of times. It just is. And sometimes men won't have that. It's like a man who's not tall, he's not going to be tall. But what can he do? He can work on what he's got. That's what he can do.
It's a joke, but we can be funny about this. This is my impersonation of a woman. I'm laughing, I'm naked. If you can make a woman laugh, the only dates I ever got with people I can make laugh. If you can make a woman laugh, she will likely have a coffee with you. And then the third thing, and this is the most underleveraged secret weapon in mating, kindness. Because women instinctively know there might be periods in their life through gestation or because they are smaller physically that they need someone who baseline is kind, right? So a kindness practice. I'm not proud of this.
You say you were not always kind.
I'm not
Scott.
proud of this. I was not born with the kindness gene. And when I had kids, I realized that they were going to model me. So I believe, like anything, you can develop a practice. And every day I tried to do something that demonstrated some sort of generosity towards someone with no reciprocal expectation.
When did you realize you were not a kind person?
Professionally, when I realized that I could have been so much nicer, I could have
Were you unkind? Were you an asshole?
never mean, never unkind. But what you realize is that everyone has capital. When you're young, you have more time than money. When you're older, you have some money. I got some early success. It would have been so easy for me to lift young people up.
And so to note here also, there's a big difference between nice and kind. Nice is a little more people-pleasing and manipulative. It's when you kind of give with strings attached. You want a specific outcome. Kind is when you don't give with any expectation of something in return. That's more of what he's talking about. You do it because you think it's the right thing to do. And you'll know you're truly being kind where if it doesn't get received well or you don't get reciprocation, you're okay because you gave from a place of not expecting something in return. You want to aim for being kind. Don't aim for being nice.
Yep.
I was never mean, but it would have been so easy for me to say, you were just outstanding in that meeting. Or I've been watching you. I think you're going to do great. This is where I think you could improve. It's so easy. And you don't have to be a baller. I saw an old couple, I'm virtue signaling right now, but it's true. I saw an old couple in the street. They looked amazing. It was one of those New York couples. And I stopped them and I said, you guys just look amazing. And I could tell it made them feel good and it made me feel better about myself. And now after doing this for 20 years, it's common practice. But these are basic reasons why women are drawn to men. What I would say to you is it sounds like you've worked a lot on yourself and you're ready. Boss, there's no free lunch. If you want to make real money, if you want to hang out with someone higher character than you and better looking than you, quite frankly, get ready to eat shit because it involves rejection over and over and over. Nothing wonderful will happen to you without taking an uncomfortable risk. And a lot of it is just practice. Get used to no. And when I tell these men I mentor, church group, sports league, whatever it might be, and then you got to express friendship or romantic interest, and this is what's going to happen. You're probably going to get to know, and then you're going to call me the next day. I'm going to say, are you all right? And that person's going to say yes. I'm going to say, okay, now the next time it's 2 approaches. You just got to build some calluses. There's no easy way around it.
Yeah.
No is the path to wonderful yeses.
Amen to that, actually. That's very true. No is the pathway. Now, Nick says it doesn't really date because from personal experience, I didn't want to have to be less to stabilize someone else. What do you mean by that? Having to be less to stabilize someone else? Well, I guess first, are you a man or a woman? I should probably know this, but I don't. And that would actually determine what I would say the answer would be. There's a considerable difference between having a sense of humor versus acting goofy. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, anyone you would have to pretend to not be able to do things with is probably not very good for you. Remember the sun. The sun doesn't give a fuck if it blinds you. It just keeps on shining. So remember that the next time you're tempted to dull your shine or dull your light for someone else. Yeah, so that's a common thing. So any guy that isn't going to be able to handle himself and just feels threatened by you and your success and who you are, that's a guy that's more insecure at that point, or that's a guy that you're just not compatible with. One or the other.
Got that, Brandon?
I got it. I'm
You
going to try
got
my
it.
best.
Thank
the
you,
humor
Brandon.
part helps. Thank you.
I applaud you, Brandon, too, for allowing yourself to be so vulnerable on that tape. That's why you got 5 million responses, because people respond to your heart.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess, and then let me add this too. Being vulnerable like that isn't the only way to be authentic. I think ultimately you could say it's under the vulnerability umbrella, but a lot of times people like it when there's those sad little posts with the sad little theme music there. Oh, whoa. Oh, it's almost a little woe's me like in a way. And I don't like that very much. But the opposite, what happens is the opposite that men give can be more of a toxic space sometimes. Like that happens too. But where's the happy medium? That's more rare. Now, I will be speaking to Connor Beaton, I think, in January. He is Man Talks on YouTube and Man Talks on Instagram. So we should have a good discussion together. And we'll probably go over some of this.
Jermaine is 25. And first, here's a quick look at one of his TikToks.
America, I'm not gonna lie. I really think that us as men, the male power, we are literally having a crisis that nobody is talking about. There are so many men that I know that are struggling with like mental health and depression, especially in these times where the economy and like money and jobs, more men don't have jobs right now. More men are going through financial struggles. More men my age who got degrees, who went to college, who did all the right things, cannot find jobs, and nobody's really talking about it. And yeah, we're seeing these stats that say like, oh, less men are having kids, less men are getting married. Do y'all think that's by choice? That is not by choice. This is not our fathers and our grandfathers' economy. Why would I sit here and put myself in a bigger bind of trying to get married, have a kid, and buy a house if I can't even survive on my own? And I feel like nobody is talking about this. And eventually, this has to become a part of the public conversation as society is moving forward.
I mean, honestly, everyone's talking about this, honestly. And I think I've talked to the Tin Man about it. I've talked to I feel like guys in general have been stuck on this same topic for a while. And they all say the same things. Oh, no one talks about it. No one talks about it. Not really true. I mean, many moons ago, I used to like learn from the dating guru people. Like that was my entrance into the self-help world. That in the 12-step programs, between those two things. And all throughout that stuff, there's men getting together and talking about their stuff. But for some reason, there seems to be a large group of men that seem to have no one. I don't really know why that is. I'm not sure what's going wrong and why they feel so alone. But, and me personally, I don't really need that much social time in person with people. I mean, I talk to a lot of people because of what I do online, and I know all sorts of people. But I think it's also good to enjoy your solitude as well. And so, what do they say? I think Ralph Waldo Emerson said that a bore is someone that deprives you of your solitude without providing you company. And I was like, yeah, that's probably how it goes. But I like my alone time. I like being on my own. Being around people too often drains me. It drains my social battery because I'm more of an outgoing introvert.
Okay, we are having that conversation right now. We are. So asking, it's given. So what's your question?
Yeah, I think my question, and related back to the video, is that I think we're having a conversation about men who are just, in the basement and just unsure where life is taking them. What we're not having the conversation about is men like me who did do the right things. You go to college, you have the right job, you don't really struggle necessarily with relationships or women or whatever, but you do have this kind of fear of, I'm doing all the right things right now at 25. How do I stay on track with the way the political climate is going, the way the economy is going? This is a whole new era that we're in. And so my question is just, what do you say to men who are 25, who are on the right path, doing the right things to stay focused and stay ahead of the curve for the future when it looks very unpredictable here in the United States?
You just wish as you got older, you could wrap your arms around people and give them the confidence they deserve. You know, if I had your looks, I'd be the leading candidate for the Democratic presidential nomination right now. Look, this pivots to solutions, but the reality is my generation and old people have figured out a way to continue to vote themselves more money. People over the age of 60 are 72% wealthier than 60-year-olds 40 years ago. People under the age of 40 are 24% less wealthy. Marriage is the new luxury item. If you're in the top quintile of income-earning homes, there's a 4 in 5 chance you'll get married. If you're a man in the bottom quintile, there's a 1 in 5 chance you'll get married. Unfortunately, income as it relates to college, certification, confidence, the ability to put yourself in environments for mating, it's really unfortunate. It's now related to the income of your parents. So what I would suggest is the following. Realize that a lot of this is not your fault and forgive yourself. And 2, as citizens, there are common sense solutions, but they're not that romantic or don't make for good TikToks. We need $25 an hour minimum wage. We need, you know what would be the best thing for young men right now? Universal child care. Where a man is at the greatest risk of self-harm is in the year after he gets divorced. He loses his primary relationship. 1 out of 3 men no longer have contact with their children 6 years after divorce. That is the zone of suicide. And why do young people get divorced? Is it a lack of shared values? No. Is it an infidelity? No. It's financial strain. So if we want healthier, loving households, it's pretty damn easy. My generation needs to stop hoarding so much wealth with economic policies that benefit us. For the first time in our nation's history, in 275 years, a 30-year-old isn't doing as well as his or her parents were at the age of 30. National service, tax credits for third places, $25 an hour minimum wage, more vocational training, universal child care, Pell Grants. When I went to UCLA, the admissions rate was 74%. This year it'll be 9%. I went for $7,000 total tuition. My first house in San Francisco cost $280,000, which I bought when I was 28. But now my generation has weaponized college and housing. Once I get a degree in a house, I want the admissions rates to go down. And all of a sudden I become concerned with traffic and I don't like any more housing permits. This is pretty damn simple. We got to put more money in everyone's pocket here. I got to stop buttressing my own wealth with your credit card, deficit spending that elevates my wealth and robs economic opportunity from you. The greatest thing we could do about the loneliness crisis and the mating crisis, pretty damn simple. Put more money in your pockets, full stop.
Well, and how does that happen? It doesn't happen magically. It happens when we learn to help ourselves. I think a book everyone should read is Tony Robbins' Master the Money Game. And he talks about the importance of investing, not gambling or day trading, but simply investing in, say, an index fund like the S&P 500 and doing it consistently to build your wealth. But there's many areas of life, right? One area is wealth. Another area is dating. Another area is your physical health. Another area is your mental health. Another area is your career aspirations and your hobbies. There's so many things to work on here. So you got to take it one thing at a time. And again, this is the other thing. So Black Sheep said that sometimes these guys can come off as overly sappy. And I agree. I do agree they can be. And this is where I think women seem tougher to me than a lot of guys. A lot of times they're more socially calibrated and they seem to be more resilient. And some of these guys just seem to be like really falling behind. And it's like, you got to do something about that, guys. Like no one's going to save you. You got to learn how to help yourself. Like even though say God helps those who helps themselves. And I would say, yes, that's true. And there's all sorts of people, and especially online right now, there's all sorts of content to help people. Education via podcasts and YouTube channels, that's very valuable. That's something that as little as 15 years ago just didn't really exist. Like people didn't learn online, but now you can get an entire almost secondary education from listening to podcasts. You can look at my channel, for example. People are learning all about narcissism and toxic behaviors. That wasn't around 15 years ago, but now it is. So there's lots of opportunities here that if only we're able to find them. Or as Dumbledore said in Harry Potter, one can find light even in the darkest of places if one only remembers to turn on the light.
Makes sense?
Makes sense.
Makes sense. Thank you. Thank you, Jermaine. Let's talk about the term toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
Now, you say that this elicits all sorts of reactions, and you call that phrase the emperor of all oxymorons. What's your take?
Well, I don't think there's any such thing as toxic masculinity. I think there's cruelty, there's abuse of power, there's violence, but masculinity is supposed to get in the way of those things. Women need to cross the street when they see men because they feel safer, right? It breaks my heart that you hear in New York, women are afraid to get on subways, and they'll say because there's too many men.
Yep.
So from a very young age, we have to teach our boys, you're a protector. That's how you demonstrate masculinity. And it's not just physical. Real men break up fights at bars. They don't start them. Your default operating system as a man should be to weigh in and protect. That's why we're here. We have denser bone structure, better double twitch muscle, and this amazing thing called testosterone. And the whole reason we're given that is such that we can protect people. Move to that.
Okay, so some women heard we were talking to men today and wanted to be here. Maria Claire, what do you want to say?
I just want to say your household name in my apartment of 3 25-year-old women. So I'm very, very grateful for the work that you're doing. And really, anytime I hear this conversation being advanced, it brings me a lot of joy and hope to see thought leaders just stepping in, wanting to protect and honestly redeem and restore my generation. Because I mean, I'm heartbroken by what's going on, and I'm heartbroken for everyone in this room. I'm heartbroken for myself.
What breaks your heart the most?
The desperation. It breaks my heart for me and like my girlfriends that I talk to, that any hope and desire that we'll be married with kids is like faith driven. Because if you look at the facts, there's no reason to it. You know, like, why would I hope that someone would like want to say I do to me a bunch of times throughout my life if like they can't even use the word date? And it's heartbreak, and it's not anger, because I know that it's a systematic problem. But
I think that's a very, very profound distinction, that it's heartbreak and not anger.
It's not anger, it's heartbreak. And I mean, I could talk all day about how I think big tech is the enemy of community and fruitful relationships, and social media almost ruined my life. And I can only speak for myself when I say that, but it really almost did. And I think it is ruining some lives, and I think it will continue to do so if we don't do something about it. But I guess my question for you is something a little bit more abstract and loftier. In the midst of this crisis, how can we love each other well in this generation? How can we show up for each other? And what type of encouragement do men need to hear from their peers?
I just don't think there's any getting around it. I think we have robbed prosperity and opportunity from your generation to transfer it to mine. The D in democracy is working too well. Old people have figured out a way to vote themselves more money. I would suggest is in terms of how we show up for each other, I think big tech is part of the problem. I think synthetic relationships for people under the age of 18 should be outlawed. I think social media, there should be no social media under the age of 16, no phones in schools. My colleague at NYU, Jonathan Haidt's done a lot of great work around this. But what I would suggest is that getting out, saying yes a lot, yes to invitations. I think young people do have more agency than they recognize. And that the key to happiness, I think, is almost entirely correlated with how much time you spend out of the house. And so what I would say to any young person is try to say yes to many things as are out of the house. And also, I feel like young people through Instagram and online dating had developed a series of red flags where they immediately say, oh, he's not over 6 feet, or she doesn't have a certain color hair, and they write off each other. So this is the reality of human sexuality. Men are much less choosy. We're much more promiscuous. The reality is men need venues to demonstrate excellence. And if you talk to people who've been married longer than 30 years, almost always one was more interested in the other, and it was usually the man that was more interested in the woman. But what happened is at church, I liked the way he treated his parents. I found out he was really talented. He made me laugh. Where does a man demonstrate excellence right now? They're not going to church. Remote work, I think, is the worst thing to happen to young people. A third of relationships begin at work, and 99% of them are consensual. It's not like it's all predatory. I've had 11 marriages at the companies I've started, and I'm like, I had no idea they were sleeping together. Did anyone know? And they get married, and that's a wonderful thing. Anyways, what I would say is that vote for people who are going to recognize that young people need to share in this prosperity, but also to realize you do have agency, right? And getting out, being friendly, being open, that's the only advice I can provide. And try and put away the phone, because 200 times a day, you're going to get a reminder that you're not living up to this fake life that someone else is pretending to have.
I see you guys nodding. Everybody's nodding because you.
So I'm a little confused as to why the woman's so upset. Is it because she's not meeting someone? Is that part of the problem? And yes, Kat, remote work is great for disabled people. But I think for men in general, they got to learn how to display their excellence, as he said. And there's many different avenues to do that. Like one way is their career. Sometimes they can do it through their hobbies. Sometimes they can create content online. Everyone just has to find the way that works for them.
It feels like you've gotten this, right? You know this is happening. Yeah. So Jack is in our audience, and I hear, Jack, you read Scott's book, and you have a question about dating.
I do.
Yeah.
A lot of excerpts from your book stuck with me.
Yep.
But one in particular is a callback to the point you were making on how one of the most important strengths a young man can develop is a willingness to endure rejection.
Yeah.
I love to go to run clubs and try to be intentional about going to third spaces with my friends.
Yep.
And we often talk about how many strangers are we going to say hi to? How many people are we going to ask to coffee? And we say 5, 10. And then we check in at the end, and it's usually 0. It might be 1. What would you tell your 25-year-old self who may have felt that way? Or maybe you never felt that way. But for all the men that you mentor, what do you tell them?
So, look, I live a life that is just my parents wouldn't believe, right? I'm here with Oprah, right? And when I reverse engineer those things, they come back to the irrational passion for my well-being of my mother. I'm a product of big government. I got assisted lunch, Pell Grants, public school. My mom accessed family planning. If we hadn't had access to that, we would have been in poverty. So it really upsets me that immigrants built my companies. I ran tech companies. It really upsets me that America today seems to be attacking everything that got me kind of where I am. If I could go back in time, I would say forgive yourself, because, I remember thinking like, oh gosh, I had companies go bankrupt that I'd started. I endured a lot of rejection from women. I wish I could go back and say, all right, you can add value to a company. So you will make someone happy. If you keep trying and you're a good person, you will make money. But my superpower, quite frankly, and this is the superpower I'd want everyone to inherit by doing what you're doing, approaching strangers, my superpower is rejection. Specifically, I'm willing to endure it. I applied to 9 graduate schools. I got into 0, and then 1 let me off the waiting list. I can't tell you the amount of rejection I've endured from women. And the ability to mourn and move on, I get a lot of power from my atheism. And I believe at some point I'm going to look into my boy's eyes and know our relationship is coming to an end. And embracing my insignificance and your insignificance, makes me feel so much better, because when I say something stupid or I endure some form of rejection, it gives me comfort to know they're going to be dead soon and so am I, and it doesn't matter. So why on earth would I not squeeze as much juice out of this lime called life and establish the ability to mourn and move on? So what you're doing is a key practice, because the ability to endure rejection, again, it's kind of everything. Everybody sees the guy or the gal who has it all. I can't imagine everything was a yes for you. I can't imagine the amount of no's you got to get to this point. But the ability to look in the mirror and go, that's okay, we're both going to be fine. It's everything. The fact that you're out, you're at run clubs, and you're even having these conversations with other men, I'm not worried about you. You should be mentoring me. You're going to be just fine.
Okay, Jack. So Anne-Marie, what did you want to say?
So this has been such a great and enlightening conversation. I have so many thoughts that I want to add. I have to say, for a lot of my friends, we've just completely given up on dating. We're more focused on our family and our friends and our careers. And for me personally, I feel like I've gotten to a point where I really love the version of myself that I've become. I put a lot of work into her. I'm really focused on my career and that emotional independence. And it feels really great to be in that space. So I thought when I started dating again, that would actually make dating easier. But I feel like it's getting so much harder to actually find someone who is willing to come to the table and meet me where I am. So my question for Scott is, as women continue to level up more and more, why do you think that we can't find as many men that are willing to meet us there?
So what you said was really telling, that you're pouring your energy into family, friends, and work. That is very telling. That's more indicative of women than men. And that is, women tend to channel that energy, that romantic energy or lack thereof, or interest, into very positive things, whereas men sometimes channel it into negative things. The reality is, my message, I'm not here with a message for hope on this, because the reality is women made socioeconomically, horizontally, and up. Women, generally speaking, and this isn't true for everybody, but generally speaking, women who graduated from college don't want to date men who didn't graduate from college. Not always, but generally speaking. It's the high heels effect. And again, this is an uncomfortable conversation. 50% of women say they would never date a man shorter than them. I think that's bullshit. I think it's more like 80%. I think women instinctively want a dude they feel that could physically protect them. And the problem is, or the issue is, and it's both a wonderful thing, but something that's created knock-on effects in mating, is that women metaphorically are getting taller every year, and men appear to be getting shorter. I'm saying metaphorically. And the divorce rates have skyrocketed, and 70% of divorce filings are from women. And it's because, and it's actually for some good reasons, women no longer feel like they're economically indentured servants. They have their own game, and their ascent economically has not been matched by men's ascent emotionally and logistically. So women wake up and say, okay, I'm making more money than you. You're not pulling your weight at home, and you're kind of not there for me. You're not really noticing me. And so a lot of women are doing the math and exiting the relationship. What I would say is, what you're feeling, quite frankly, I think is what a lot of women are feeling. And a lot of women say there are no good men to date, or there are no men to date. No, there just aren't that many men they'd want to date. And so where I try to go to solutions is, how do we lift up young people such that they're all, or more of them, are economically viable, which I think will, on the margin, lift up or disproportionately impact young men. But
And what you do is you empower them and educate them to help themselves. And there's a big difference between learning skills for a career versus fiscal education. They can be two different things. Like, there's a reason why most high schools don't teach anything about investing or crypto. That's not by accident, because a lot of times that's not what they're there for. Unless you have parents that teach you those things, you're not going to do it a lot of times, especially at a young age, unless you're one of the unique people that has that interest and then tries to learn it on their own. A lot of times, they just want you to learn a skill and then go get a job, the end. But as we're learning, that's just not always sufficient a lot of times. It's not going to be enough.
just the fact that you said you're self-conscious or aware enough to pour that energy into really productive things means you're going to be fine. I don't think romantic love is the be-all, end-all for everybody. It's really rewarding, But I think you can find what I'll call that sort of purpose, relational love in a lot of different areas. And the fact that you're even thinking about how you channel that energy into stuff that's more productive, you're the role model for young men right now. Not everyone's going to find romantic love right away, or it's going to happen, it's going to take longer. But how do you transfer it into more productive means that make you a better person, a better citizen, a better sister, better daughter? So anyways, this is a long-winded way of saying, right on. You're being a productive human. You're going to be happy regardless if you find that or not. And I just wish more men would take your lead and say, all right, maybe things aren't working out for me romantically. I'm going to continue to work on myself. And I'm going to pour that energy into other relationships.
Yeah, that's what.
I mean, and that's what I've done in my own life. I'm not married. And I said, you know what? In my 20s, I was really hell-bent on marriage and kids. But my problem was I was focusing on those things too much. I wasn't focusing enough on me and what I would actually bring to the table. It was more about, for me, oh, what can I get? What can I get? What can I get? Can I get sex? It's like, no, that's just not the right way to be going into it. I wasn't thinking about, oh, how can I have an angel in my life if I don't provide her some sort of heaven? I didn't think that way back then. It took me a while. And part of my issue was addiction. Part of my issue was a mood disorder. Part of my issue was undiagnosed autism. There's all sorts of things. Now it's begun to make more sense to me considering what I do now. But that's what I didn't do back then. I wasn't pouring it into my purpose, my mission. That's really what I do now. What I do now is I create the content, make videos, do interviews, and that's me. And this is, the job never ends, honestly, because there's not much security in a lot of this. It can be very fickle. The algorithms can be fickle. Coaching consultations can be fickle. So I'm building something that I'm getting to a place where it can be more stable.
Brandon did. That's what he said at the very beginning. So we have another question. Mike, what's your question?
So thanks, Scott. This really touches home for me. My wife and I have triplets, 24 years old. My one son graduated from college. He's doing pretty well, lives in Chicago, works for a big firm. My son actually has a job, but he's not happy with it at all. My daughter went on to get a master's degree. My question to you is, as you stated earlier, this is the generation that we don't see outdoing their parents.
Yeah.
My wife and I, kind of troubling to us. What can we do as parents? What advice would you have for this generation, and what can we do as a society to help out?
So the first thing is you and your wife need to forgive yourselves, recognizing the market's bigger than any individual performance. So by virtue of the fact you're really involved in your kids' lives, that's probably the most important thing, just being there and present. But I do think we need to acknowledge that, again, there are programs, economic and social programs, to help lift young people up. 1 out of 3 young men under the age of 25 is living at home. 1 out of 5 men, right, is living still at home at the age of 30. So the number of people living at home, men living at home, has doubled. And it creates rage and shame across our whole culture, because whether you want to or not, you're kind of, by them living with you, you're kind of a reminder they're not doing well. And you also take it on like, you know, at the end of the day, as fathers and as mothers, we feel like that's our one job, right? And so when it's not going well, it just attacks our self-esteem. So without knowing your specific situation and not having the domain expertise to counsel you in a thoughtful way, what I can say is this is an issue facing America. I think it's our biggest issue. And we need to stop sending to DC a cross between the Golden Girls and the Land of the Dead. 2/3 of Congress is going to be dead in 25 years. Do you think they're really worried? Do you think they're really worried about you or the national deficit or climate change? So my point is, young people, vote, get out, and also as a parent, forgive yourself. You're doing your best, and a lot of this is out of your control.
Yeah, one more, because as you said, being there in the home form, my parents didn't know where the heck I was when I was these guys' age. Is that helpful or is that a hindrance?
I actually think it was a good thing. I think we overprotect our kids offline and underprotect them online. We won't let a 9-year-old 2/3 of 9-year-olds have never walked down a grocery shopping aisle alone, but they go online where they interact with strangers and bots. I used to leave my mom's house at 9 a.m. on a Saturday morning with an Abba Zaba bar, a Schwinn bike, and 35 cents, and she wouldn't see me for 14 hours. I got bullied, I got into trouble, and it was great for me. It was great for me. I developed resilience, a sense of adventure, camaraderie. I'm not suggesting anyone should be traumatized, but we overprotect children. The two things that appear to be spiking teen depression are one, when social went on mobile, and also the concierge bulldozer parenting of my generation, where we clear out every obstacle for kids, and then they get to college and they get their first D or they get their heart broken and they literally freak out. They've never known that.
It sounds like what I was saying before, right? Life punches them in the face and then they don't know how to handle it. And what he's talking about here is what social psychologist Jonathan Haidt says. He says the kids are overprotected in public, but underprotected online because there's all sorts of danger and predators online. Absolutely true. And he's also talking about the snowplow parent effect. They're the parents that clear the obstacles from their kid's path. But when that happens, if they clear all of them, then that kid doesn't develop resilience. And like he said, though, it's not about letting them get traumatized or something. But at the same point, overcoming adversity is good. Overcoming obstacles and challenges is good. That's what life is all about.
So it's a combination of things, but I think the overparenting of my generation, I don't know if you're guilty of this or not, but I would not come home till 11 p.m. My son's 5 minutes late from school. We call MI6 in the CIA. So I think some of it is overprotection. I don't think it's been a good thing for kids.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Mike. Thank you for this book.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're all getting it.
All right.
At the end of the book, I love the message. It's a long message, so I wanted you to summarize. You write a message to your sons. What is the ultimate message that you want to give them and want to give to the world through this book?
Well, so at the end of the book, I wrote a letter to my sons.
Which I think everybody should write a letter to their sons.
Sure, why not?
As I was
right?
reading that, I was thinking, yeah, everybody should write a letter to their sons.
One, first and foremost, I want them to know how immensely I love them. Two, I want them to realize the best decision their dad made and the best decision they made was being born in America. I really do think there are certain wonderful attributes, some of which unfortunately appear to be on pause right now. I hope they haven't gone away, but I hope that they always appreciate how fortunate and blessed they were to be born in America and that they reinvest in America.
Mm-hmm.
And then more than anything, that they take care of their mom.
Mm. Thank you.
Thank
Notes
you.
on being a man. Scott Galloway. Big shout out. Thank you, New York. Beautiful.
Thank you.
Beautiful color, too. Wow, that was interesting. Thank you, guys. Thanks for coming out on a rainy day in New York City. Thank you. Thank you. So what will be your takeaway?
Be kind.
Be kind.
Get out to the ballot box and vote.
Yeah, that was one of my big takeaways, too. It's clear, yes.
My big one was take care of your mom. I just lost my dad this year, so very important to me.
Be an active participant in the redefinition of masculinity.
Well, now. Okay, I love that. I love that.
Don't just listen to this conversation. Go do something. Go mentor a younger man.
Go mentor a younger man.
Men have struggles too, and I can accept that, and we can work with it.
We can work with it, yeah.
My takeaway is that men don't want to be told how to be men. We want to feel like men. So create spaces for men to thrive, to access the full range of emotions that we have access to, and model behavior.
And model behavior. Did you have a takeaway, Brandon?
Be okay with rejection. Go for it. Like, don't worry about getting told no. It's okay.
Thank you all for being here. Thank you so much.
All right. That's enough of that. So, and honestly, some of those guys need a little bit of what Teal Swan was saying in that video the other night. The positive masculine containment, Think about the qualities that she was talking about in that video: taking initiation, being direct, being assertive, offending for the people in their lives. It's like a lot of those guys that are struggling, that's probably not what they're doing. And they need to cultivate those masculine qualities. The other part of it would be, I think the most important thing they would say is take action. Whatever you do, without action, nothing will change. So yeah, it's great talking about it, but what are you going to do? Because until you do something different, if nothing changes, nothing changes. Yeah, Teal Swan. Now, I'll be curious, Kat, what you don't like about Teal Swan. I haven't been watching as much of her recently, but I do like a lot of her thoughts on the dating stuff. I think she's got a point with that. Also, with that guy, Scott Galloway, I didn't want to say this in the beginning because I didn't want to taint your perspective of him. But on Chris Williamson, he said that he's addicted to external validation and he's addicted to money. And what does that sound like? Sounds like someone who is a bit narcissistic, I would say, right? But he's the kind of narcissistic that could possibly do the most damage in a way because he's self-aware. Like, he's self-aware and he's honest about it. So you could say, well, is that really narcissistic if he's self-aware about it? Yeah, I guess it depends, right? It just depends on what he is. It depends on how it displays itself. But I think character, and again, considering the genetic component of narcissism, if a kid has that gene, I think the only thing left to do is to teach them character so that character becomes their guardrail. Because if they don't have character, what would be their guardrail? Absolutely nothing. And then they're just going to damage people their entire lives. They'll damage themselves and they'll damage others. Takes intensely ballsy people. Being kind in a system that resents you for not participating in slight narcissism against others will get you bullied. Yeah, that can happen. Kat says, I don't like the fact she's apparently a borderline and made up her whole backstory. And that's totally fair. If she made it up, that would be one of the worst things about her. And is she borderline? Has she admitted she is? I know some people think she might be narcissistic. Now, the worst I've seen of her is she did this group once, and it seemed like she was being a little bit antagonistic in this group here. It didn't really seem like an emotionally safe thing. So I didn't like that. There was a documentary about that. But in terms of her message, I like the message that she shares in a lot of her YouTube content. That being said, her, the messenger, is a different story. And if she made up her backstory, that speaks to a lack of character, if you ask me. But all right, everybody, that was really it for tonight. Tomorrow, you'll be seeing the interview with Justin. We spoke for a couple hours. And we talked about different kinds of things. We talked about health. We talked about big pharma. We talked about capitalist porn and people that are really hardworking are often in a trauma response. But we squared that with the genetic component of personality and how that impacts it. So many different things we talked about. Look, some conspiracy-oriented stuff. We left no stone unturned. It's a pretty cool conversation. And depending on how people like it, I'll have more conversations like that again in the future. And I got to see, I'll find someone else to talk to later this week too. Maybe my friend Kelly, or maybe Marcella, or maybe someone else. I'll figure it out. You got it, Kat. I was always happy to have you here, as I'm happy to have everyone here. Ellie, Nick, Arwen, Phil Bradley, George. Where's George and Jolly been, by the way? I'll give George a demerit. But George does good. He timestamps some of the videos, so I appreciate when he does that. Takes the interesting points and lets people know in the comments section when they happened. But all right, Kat, and everyone else, till next time, I'll probably be back again tomorrow night. Rhodes, you got it, Rhodes. Till next time. Arwen is Lord of the Rings, Steven Tyler's daughter, right? It's a great name. I love it. Take care.